The gritty reboot. Popularized in modern times by Batman Begins, this concept has actually been around for a lot longer than people realize. It's often used as shorthand by movie studios, comic book publishers, and video game developers as a way to tell the audience that they're starting over with the franchise, going back to the beginning and stripping away all the fluff and taking it much more seriously. Sometimes this could lead to really good things, like Dread or the 2013 Tomb Raider game. Of course, sometimes it could lead to really bad things, like Prince of Persia Warrior Within, or that one Bomberman game for Xbox 360. So why is this concept so popular and yet so hard to pull off? What does it take to do a gritty reboot right? Let's first define what a gritty reboot is for the purposes of this discussion. A reboot is when the story and continuity of a particular work of fiction, specifically an ongoing work of fiction, is completely disregarded in order to start over again from the beginning. Gritty, meanwhile, means that the work is going to be much serious and darker than previous entries, often with a much greater focus on realism. So something like the 2009 Star Trek movie wouldn't necessarily be a gritty reboot because it's not that much more serious or darker or based in realism than any other previous Star Trek movies. Casino Royale, on the other hand, would be considered a gritty reboot because the previous Bond movie before that had a fucking invisible car. As mentioned earlier, the idea of the modern reboot came out of the success of Batman Begins back in 2005. Now, Batman Begins really is the prototypical gritty reboot. It broke clean of all the other Batman films that came before it. It's much more serious and darker than the last film in the series, and has a much greater focus on realism, trying to portray Batman's world as a real world. And it worked. But like a lot of success stories in Hollywood, studios learned the wrong things from it. They don't realize that just because something worked for Batman doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. A gritty reboot works for Batman because he's a gritty character. Darkness is built into his origin and persona. Yeah, there are a lot of silly aspects to the character, and there have been successful versions of campy Batman. But that doesn't change the fact that his parents died in front of him when he was 8 years old. That's dark stuff. And I think that's really important. A gritty reboot only works if the character or franchise you're working on has some sort of darkness built into it already. Believe me when I say I take no pleasure in picking on Man of Steel all the time, but it really is the best example of a gritty reboot gone wrong. This is the image everybody has in their head when they think of Superman. Bright colors, the American flag, a fucking smile on his face, not some dour looking guy in a monochromatic picture in the rain. Superman represents hope. He's supposed to inspire people, not make everybody sad. I mean, they tried this back in the 90s with the black suit, the mullet, holding guns, and it just looks ridiculous. And you want to talk about gritty reboots gone awry, imagine what would have happened if Tim Burton's Superman movie actually got off the ground. I feel like sometimes studios and publishers confuse making a character dark and gritty with taking them seriously. They're two very different things. The Marvel movies are far from what I'd call gritty, but they do take their characters and their world very seriously. Winter Soldier is probably the darkest movie they've made so far, and it's still pretty light compared to Man of Steel. Now, is it possible for something on the lighter end of the spectrum to be rebooted all dark and gritty like? Yes. Battlestar Galactica did it. The original 1978 Battlestar Galactica was in every sense of the word a Star Wars knockoff, right down to the adventurous swashbuckling tone. But the reboot in 2004 was nothing like it. It was militaristic, it was dark, bleak, and depressing, and one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Seriously, whenever I meet somebody who also watches Battlestar Galactica, we nerd out for like 20 minutes and piss off everybody. This is kind of like what happened in the recent Power Rangers reboot by Adi Shankar and Joseph Kahn, but not quite. They went just a bit too far with the dark angle. They took the war aspect of Power Rangers to the most extreme place possible and added a sex and drugs angle that was never really there. Also, Power Rangers has been on the air consistently for about 20 years now, so people know it's not so much about war as it is about superheroics. Whereas Battlestar Galactica was only on air for like one season and then pretty much fell off everybody's radar. When it was time for the reboot, enough time had passed where people forgot about the original and they were able to do their own thing with the remake. I can go on listing examples, but the point I want to make is I have no problem with gritty reboots when done responsibly. When done right, a gritty reboot can reestablish a character or franchise in ways never thought possible, to go beyond the surface level entertainment that people previously thought it was. When done wrong, you get works that completely miss the point of why people like it in the first place and can wind up doing more harm than good. And in some cases, you even have to reboot it again not that long after your first reboot. So if there's anybody watching in a position of power at a major movie studio or a video game comic book publisher, please, be careful. That's all we're asking. What do you guys think? How do you feel about gritty reboots? What are some of your favorites or your least favorites? And are you sick of them yet? I know a lot of you are. Let me know down below or anywhere on social media. If you saw Bob's video on Monday, you know we're going to be Twitch streaming Wednesdays at 10, so stay tuned for that. And as always, like if you like, subscribe if you really like, share this video with your friends. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. The emblem isn't red and yellow. It's red and blue with a yellow outline. You may be thinking why that's such a big deal. I mean, after all, Batman's logo changes and everything. Well, it's because for 77 years now, this has been the default logo for all things Superman. I am going to now pitch to Sony and Ivan Reitman and Dan Aykroyd and anybody who will listen, I'm going to pitch my take for Ghostbusters 3.
You know, if you want to send it to Dan Aykroyd, you can. You can email him directly through his wine company.